Hi, Linda.
Hi, Jill.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, I've been thinking about what you said. I think you were right last week. Yeah. I got you. I know what you mean. Yeah. All right. Drugs. I need drugs. Like this. Oh, let's see. So we can. I think what I'm going to do is start out with. We'll do the prayers, and then we'll do a buddy, kind of a. Bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta, because that's the whole point of Mahayana Buddhism, right? Is how to cultivate the awakening mind. And that and that feeds into karma, because the most powerful, what's the most important aspect of karma? No, we talked about this. Pardon? Well, and in terms of creating it, what's the most important aspect? Intention, or we sometimes say motivation, but it's intention. What's the most powerful intention? What'd you say? Bodhicitta. Yeah. So bodhicitta is sort of a compassionate intention for any action, guaranteed to result in happiness. And if that compassionate intention is motivated not just for the happiness of universal living beings, then the power of that action, which might be just, by a factor of one, is multiplied by literally infinity, if you can think that big. Of course, it's for most of us, that's completely theoretical, but it's, so that's what bodhicitta is about. I must become enlightened. It's the altruistic intention to become enlightened, based on love and compassion. Liberate all sentient beings from suffering and establish them in supreme enlightenment. So this is my California daughter, Lillian Brown, all the way from LA. She actually made it. By the way, I told her about Layla's trip across, walking across Spain. You know Layla, right? Yeah. Lily wants to go.
How long are you going to be here in town? Oh. I was going to say you should come over and talk. Y'all might be able to.
Okay, so You want to show the prayers?
Hi, everyone. Hang on. Okay. I'm trying to get myself organized here.
Okay. All right, so again,
Page 34 in the Gold Prayer Book.
so, nobody else, and I see Javon's new. Anybody else new here for first night of the class? Lily. So, true. All right, so the first, again, generating refuge in bodhicitta, the first two lines have to do with distinguishing someone who's a Buddhist from non-Buddhists. So Buddhists take refuge until they're enlightened, at least in the Mahayana tradition. In Theravada Buddhism, I guess it might be more until I achieve nirvana, but in Mahayana Buddhism, the goal is supreme enlightenment, which is, what is enlightenment? The elimination of all of our faults and development of all of our good qualities, which seems so far out, and seems so unbelievably amazing and possible. But, again, it's a wrong view, Chris, isn't it? To not believe that we can get enlightened. We have to have the faith that we do have that potential to get enlightened. So the first two lines, I'm a distinguish a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist. The second two lines distinguish someone who practices the Mahayana vehicle, supreme vehicle, versus Theravada vehicle, which is individual. Basically is nirvana or individual sort of enlightenment, but not in the same sense that we talk about it in Mahayana Buddhism. So we do that, and as we can do visualizations and so forth. But so we'll do that. And then the four measurables, the first line has to do, it's actually the definition of love. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And the second line is the definition of compassion. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And which is different than empathy, right? We've talked a little bit about that. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering, and that's called immeasurable joy. And then may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So that's equanimity, or a mind that's not clinging to the delicious things and pushing away and people and feeling aversion or hatred toward things that are not pleasant or people we don't like that. So with that understanding, we'll do these together. We'll do the first one, refuge in bodhicitta 3 times, and 4 measurables just 1 time. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Now let's take a couple of minutes to just settle in and relax, take a few deep breaths, and then You can follow your breath. You can do any one of the practices, mindfulness of the breath. The breath's an easy object to follow. Focusing on your mind is a little chaotic, but monitoring your breath, you can do the 9-round breathing, or just counting the breath in and out 1, in and out 2, up to 10, and start over again. Or you can just focus on the inhalation and exhalation without counting at all, but just keep the mind to bring the mind to one pointedness, and then when it gets distracted, we bring it back, and that's that's where mindfulness comes in. We have to be mindful when the mind is distracted, so we can bring it back. Sometimes mindfulness is it's translated so many ways, but non-distractedness is a good definition. And so the key factor in determining the strength of any karmic action is our intention. And the most powerful intention is the what we call bodhicitta, the awakening mind. It's the altruistic intention to become enlightened, basically to reach our full potential based on love and compassion. Not some sentimental thing, but something sincere, genuine desire to help others. And the best way to do that is to develop our qualities and eliminate our faults, to become enlightened. So, most of us in the beginning, when we want to generate bodhicitta, it's called effortful bodhicitta, because it's not a natural way to think. I mean, mostly we think about ourselves. Probably, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but most, for myself anyway, 99.999% of the time, I'm thinking about myself and what I want and what I don't want, like that. And that's considered to be human nature, but it's not helpful. And so we need to make it an adjustment and begin to focus outward on others. So bodhicitta, is so there's a series of contemplations. I'm not going to spend much time on them. There's like 10 or 11 of them. Just touch on them. But these are combining the two streams that merged at Lamantisha, combined these two streams of thought and came up with this meditation, basically combining the exchanging self with others and the 6 causes and 1 effect meditations. So the first one is called equanimity. And one of the ways that we can do this is imagine in your mind's eye, imagine like 3 beings, somebody that you feel attachment toward, that when you see them, you smile, you like them, you feel some sort of attachment. And then in the middle is the stranger, which makes up vast majority of beings. It's these faceless people in the crowd, the people that we see in the elevator, they don't have any feeling at all, really. Just, we sort of, we're aware that they're there, but we feel a sense of indifference toward most strangers. And then there are people that we feel definite aversion toward. Somebody who done us wrong in the past or maybe recently, but just seeing that person, our mind, we feel a sense of, I'm not going to say, it might be somebody you really call in your enemy, but at least somebody that you feel aversion toward. You want to bring all those 3 categories of beings into your mind's eye and imagine that they're in front of you. And then we think, okay, how can we make this is the level ground on which we're going to build this palace of bodhicitta, so it has to be strong. We don't want to build our palace on sand. It needs to be built on a solid ground of equanimity. And imagine that these 3 categories of beings they're just like us. They want to be happy. The friend, the strangers, and the enemy. They're just like us. We're all equal that way. And then sometimes we again, depending on how open your mind is and I ask people to creatively align, because it's not our default mode to think about past lives and future lives, but in past lives, the person that's our friend was our worst enemy, and may in this life become our worst enemy. It's very changeable. These relationships are not static. Every friend and every enemy that we have now was at one point a stranger. So, that's also, that relationship's also dynamic, always changing. Just a few kind words to somebody can turn a stranger into a friend, and careless words can also destroy relationships. And then the so-called enemy, that's the person that has done something that we didn't like, that I don't like, right? That's the key, the ego. So, in that relationship, we all have maybe people that we didn't like before, but now they're our friends. Relationships are very changeable. So we put, we certainly have friends that have become enemies that become friends, and so on. And then the other thing I like to focus on this difficult person because it helps my mind a lot to think that this person that I have labeled enemy, where did that person come from? Where did that person come from? That person is the fruition of my own former actions. I think in the Bodhicharya Shantideva talks about how if somebody hits you with a stick, you don't get angry at the stick, you get angry at the person who's wielding the stick. In the same way, this person who's yelling at us, who embarrassed us, who mistreated us in whatever way, they're like the stick. The real cause of this whole circle of problems, what goes around comes around, is our own self-cherishing, selfish mind that planted the karmic seed for us to have this karmic appearance of somebody being mean to us or harming somebody we care about. So the real enemy here is not that person, although we could say conventionally maybe they are, but from a more spiritual, profound point of view, it's our own selfishness that planted the seed for us to have this karmic appearance of being harmed. So we need to point the finger at the real demon, which is self-cherishing selfishness that lives in our hearts. And then again, who do we learn patience from? It's like Geshe was talking about this the other day. He was saying, look, if you're trying to develop generosity, a beggar is not an obstacle. In the same way, if you're trying to develop patient endurance, a difficult person, a person you feel aversion to, is exactly what we need. We need to be challenged to develop the resilience that we need, and it's people like that challenge us, that gives us the opportunity to develop the inner strength that we need, to become a bodhisattva, to become a spiritual warrior. So, this so-called enemy really is like a precious jewel, helping us, not only helping us exhaust our past negative karma about when they harmed us or did whatever they did, but they're also giving us the opportunity to develop inner strength and patience and tolerance. And again, all these relationships are changeable. All of them are based on our labels. We label friend, stranger, enemy. We cling to the friend, feel indifference to the stranger, and aversion to the enemy. And those relationships are all changeable. So try to develop this even-mindedness in relationship to these three categories of beings. This even-mindedness. For just a moment. And the next contemplation is seeing all sentient beings as having been our mother, or whoever was the person that we were closest to growing up. And for most of us, it's our mom. And so we imagine that the mother of this life has been our mother in past lifetimes, will again be our mother in future lifetimes. And we've had countless rebirths, and every rebirth we've had to have a mother. And again, we're talking creatively aligning with the idea. This is mathematically a little bit hard to wrap our minds around, but consciousness is beginningless, and we've been born countless times, and each time we had a mother. And so we say that that our mother of this lifetime has been our mother countless times in the past and will be again in the future. And all living beings have been our mother countless times. So if we do that meditation, this is just said to be really one of the hardest ones to do. But if we did it well, we walk down the street and actually feel a connection to everybody that we encountered. Sometimes Lama Yeshe, he used to call everybody, hello, dear. You know, these kind, he used to call people kind mother, sentient beings, or kind mothers. But he called everybody dear. And kind of way to train the mind. And we remember the kindness of our mother of this lifetime, or whoever that being was. Try to remember some of the things that they did, you know, that not only did she carry us for 9 months, and obviously birth is not easy, and then kept us alive and fed us and clothed us, and, you know, did so many things to teach us how to walk, talk, and even to this day, for most people, that relationship still has a sacred place. That kindness that our mother of this life has shown us is unbelievable. And then we extrapolate that to universal living beings who've all been our mothers. We think everybody's been that kind to me. And just try to open your mind up that everybody you see has been your mother and has been incredibly kind to you. Maybe even like have given up their life, maybe when you were a wildebeest or some animal, or even as a human being in a former lifetime, may have died for your sake, you know? So we would try to remember the kindness of all mother sentient beings. And then we develop the wish to repay the kindness. It's not somebody else's job. If somebody's been kind to me, it's my responsibility to repay that kindness. So we generate the wish to repay the kindness. And we develop this mind of equanimity. Again, it's more like seeing the equality of self and others. And the Dalai Lama does this meditation. He says he imagines this fence or line, and he's on one side, and universal living beings are on the other side. And he says, what do I want? He says, well, I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. And then over here, there are countless living beings, and everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be happy, and nobody wants to suffer. Something we can look at each other and look in people's eyes. Anybody we meet, I don't care what your story is about them, they're driven by one motivation. I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. And I mean, to that end, some people will take their lives, will kill themselves because they don't want to suffer. So we all want to be happy. We all want to suffer. So His Holiness says, whose happiness is more important? The happiness of one or the happiness of universal living beings? And if you really want to get down to the numbers, obviously countless living beings are more important. But at the very least, their happiness is as important as mine. So we all try to remember that everybody wants exactly the same thing. Something very intimate we know about everyone we come into contact with. The next point is called the faults of self-cherishing selfishness. So selfishness is the cause of all of our problems. All of our problems. And in the text it says, all of the suffering from the beginning of beginningless time, which was a long time ago, up until this very moment, in relationships, between countries, between individuals, you name it. All the problems, all the disputes, everything comes down to one mental demon called self-cherishing selfishness. From the beginning of from the beginning of beginningless time to the present moment, the enemy that we need to be fighting, so to speak, or at least confronting and conquering is our own selfishness. And so we don't have to look out there. It's in the living in our heart. It's this, I'm the most important one, I'm the center of the universe, and so on and so on. So we have to come to terms with the damage that we do. I mean, if we look at the 10 non-virtuous actions, killing, stealing, adultery, lying, slander, harsh, frivolous talk, greed, hatred, ignorance, every one of those are fed by this self-cherishing, selfish mind. And the actions motivated by this mind will always lead to suffering, always lead to suffering. No doubt about it. And what's the cause of all happiness? It's cherishing others. The flip side of self-cherishing is cherishing others. And any action motivated by that state of mind will always lead to happiness. And then we have to do this just kind of mentally, we imagine that we are going to exchange self-cherishing for we're going to exchange self-cherishing for cherishing others. So now our come from in life is that we cherish others. We cherish others. So we get out of bed in the morning for the sake of others. We eat healthily for the sake of others. We take care of our health and our relationships, and we do our job for others. And it's everything that the focus is others, not so self-centered. Focus on others. So now we try to shift this attitude. So now we live our life for others. And then this is usually a good time, and if you have the time, to do Tonglen practice, where you can imagine that, for example, you're taking on the suffering of others, which is the action of compassion. And then on the exhalation, you might imagine white light going out, giving others what they want and need, and happiness, like that. And then the next contemplation is called the supreme wish. Supreme wish. It's many different ways, the terms used for it, but it's this attitude that a bodhisattva develops, and it's not easy. I mean, when you hear it, you think this is ridiculous. First of all, it's never been done. Why should I bother? But this is the attitude that we need to aspire to cultivate. It's the attitude that I take personal responsibility for the happiness of universal living beings. I take personal responsibility for the happiness of universal living beings. Everybody. Not anybody gets left out. Not the enemy, not the stranger. It's easy to feel, wish that for somebody we love and care dearly for, but we're talking about universal living beings. And we're taking personal responsibility for their happiness to help guide them from their present state of confusion and suffering all the way to supreme enlightenment. By myself alone. It's my job. I'm going to do that. Bob Thurman calls it the messianic vow. It's this attitude of universal compassion. Excludes nobody. And then when we come back to our senses, we go, well, that's impossible. Well, it is impossible for us to do it because we can't even solve our own problems. The only being that could potentially do that, and the only being that could do that, would be somebody who had eliminated all of their faults, developed all of their good qualities, and become a Buddha. That's the only being that has that potential. And so again, we don't think we have that potential, but that is a wrong view. We do have Buddha nature. We do have Buddha potential. We do have some compassion, some wisdom. We have some power, some ability to do it, skillful, to help others in every possible conceivable situation. There are times when we've actually been able to do that a little bit, and those potentials can be developed limitlessly. And so we aim for supreme enlightenment. Now we realize the only person that can do it's a Buddha. I got to become a Buddha. So I have to develop my qualities and eliminate my faults. I have to practice the path, renunciation, determination to be free, bodhicitta, the wisdom of emptiness, and then we enter the tantric vehicle, tantric path, and practice generation and completion stage tantra, and we eventually achieve full enlightenment in order to be able to help others. So it's like the goal is to be able to liberate everybody else, all living beings. And the method to do that is one's own enlightenment. And the byproduct of that, of focusing on others' happiness, is that we get what we wanted all along was happiness. It's just a byproduct of this whole practice of focusing on others. They say for a bodhisattva, their life is, their mind and their life is like going from joy to joy to joy. So joyful, so happy. And it's just the byproduct of this practice of focusing on becoming a Buddha for the sake of others. So that altruistic intention to become enlightened for the sake of others is the most powerful attitude we can have for any action, because it's dedicated for universal living beings. When we talk about creating good karma, even if we have a smidgen of this, just a smidgen, the attitude, even though we don't really quite get it yet, or we don't believe it, or obviously it's not easy to develop this mind, but just a taste of it, just some natural attraction to this attitude is so amazing for our minds. So just let your mind rest in that thought of, again, based on the love and compassion that we developed earlier in the meditation, this feeling of interconnectedness and closeness to all living beings, we make this determination to become a Buddha. Okay. So like I said, we're going to do, I've asked people to memorize this stuff. I think it's really important to memorize a few things in Buddhism. There are lots of lists But these are the most important lists of all. So karma. Lily, can you come up here and explain this? No? Sanskrit word means action. Potencies planted on our mental continuum by actions of body, speech, and mind. So again, we talk about, like, normally a lot of people think of karma as just stuff that happened in this lifetime, but no, they say, again, this is a little bit hard to buy. They say karma is the most profound subject in all of Buddhism, so I'm going to say that. It gets me off the hook here. It is difficult. And so they say that the karma that we create in this lifetime, vast majority of it will not ripen. The karma that we create will ripen in some future lifetime. If it's really powerful karma, it could ripen, in a like the next lifetime, for example. It could ripen in a billion lifetimes or a zillion lifetimes from now. Our karma will ripen when the seed is there and the cooperative causes are there. Like you've got a seed for an oak tree, and then you've got moisture, and you've got warmth, and the fertilizer or whatever the situation, and boom, it sprouts. So the karmic seeds can sprout. So again, getting back, these are the 4 laws of karma that is so important for us to memorize and remember. That karma is definite, that every action has a consequence. Things don't just happen randomly. And so karma is definite, the easiest way to say this is positive actions lead to happiness, negative actions lead to suffering. And and again, in Buddhism, I've mentioned this before, the way we define virtue is the long-term consequences of an action. If the long-term consequences of an action is happiness, then that action was virtuous. And we know from the teachings, and also, I can't say from necessarily our experience, but we get a sense of it, that actions that are motivated by self-centeredness and selfishness always lead to suffering. And actions motivated by compassion and kindness and respect, and those positive attitudes lead to happiness. So this is why it's so important to be mindful of our state of mind whenever we're performing any action. We're always, our mouth and our body, those are 2 things that are easiest for us to control. Our mind, forget about it. That's going to be a long time before we can control that. But at least we can control what comes out of our mouth and our physical actions. So, and most of the Buddhist vows are sort of aimed at that. So this is important. Every positive action will lead to happiness eventually. Every negative action will lead to suffering eventually. Then karma is expandable. So again, oat seed, you get this 50-ton oak tree. Well, that didn't happen overnight, right? That seed was planted, and karma grows exponentially. That's why it's so important to pay attention to what we're doing. And again, at the end of the day, take a few minutes and clean off your karmic slate. That's why purification practice, which we'll talk about in a minute, is so important. Because if you said something mean to somebody earlier in the day, that seed is growing already, and it could ripen. Sometimes I use an example in the scripture. They say, like, swatting a mosquito, particularly like you're mad, you're angry because he bit you. So you got anger on top of killing. The intention's to kill, and there's anger. Anyway, 2 weeks from that, you get the karma of having killed a human being. Seems a little bit, too much, but you get the point. Karma grows very fast. And so by the same token, a kindness, some kind maybe giving $1 to a beggar, or saying something kind to somebody at work, or a smile, whatever positive action. We need to take every opportunity to practice virtue and plant the seeds of virtue, because those seeds grow exponentially too. Again, there's this book that I read, I think I put it in the library. It's called Instant Karma. But, it was like, people were like giving money to beggars, and then all of a sudden, dollar bills were falling out of the sky. Like instant karma. But if karma were instant, this world would be a different place, wouldn't it? You think about it. People wouldn't kill because you're going to create the causes to get killed. You wouldn't steal because you're creating the causes to be impoverished and have all your stuff ripped off, and so on. So karma is expandable, very, very important. And that's why this Vajrasattva practice that we'll do next week, and I don't think we have time tonight, but next week, is the idea is at the end of the day is to review your day. And if you've done things that are like, you've got a little bit of, negativity about it, you realize I shouldn't have said that. That was not the right thing to do. And it could be something you did 2 or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever. Anything like that comes into your mind, into your consciousness, you want to develop, sincere regret for it and clean it up before you go to bed, because that karma is growing. All right. So, cannot experience the result without creating the cause. So again, this puts the responsibility on us, doesn't it? So everything that we experience is the fruit of our own former actions. And I say my former actions, but not really me, because the karma that I'm experiencing right now to cause me to be here was created by somebody, well, I won't say somebody, probably somebody in a former lifetime. This just happens to be my karma right now, ripening in this moment. It sounds a little far-fetched, but we can't experience, everything has to have a cause. And from the point of view, it's a karmic cause. So who's responsible if my life is going well? It's not, I could say it's me, but it's the continuity of my consciousness and the seeds that were planted. It is me. I'm responsible for what I have, good, bad, or indifferent. If things are not going well, then I can't, again, this is about being responsible, about being accountable for one's life, because we all have lots of things that happen to us that we don't like, and maybe not so many things that we do. And that first, if we go to victim, I'm a victim, then there's anger and resentment. It doesn't work. But if we say, look, I don't completely understand this karmic thing, but I'm going to live my life as if I'm responsible for everything, all of it, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. I'm going to be 100% responsible. I'm not going to go to I'm a victim. Okay? I'm responsible. It's so powerful because, that is the creative force. Because if we want to be a Buddha, we have to create the causes for it. If we want to be happy, we can create the causes for it. This is Lama Zopa's, he's saying we can literally shape our consciousness, our mind. Our future can be shaped by the choices that we're making right now, every moment. And then karma is never lost. And that means that every seed that planted today and lifetimes before, and we've done everything in every life, in past lifetimes we've done it all. These karmic seeds are never lost, with 2 caveats. First of all, until they're expressed. Okay, so when the cooperative cause come together, let's say you're gonna, what we talked about, becoming a Buddhist. So if you have the karma to be a Buddhist, and you happen to be walking down, whatever the street is out here, Edinburgh Circle, and you go, oh my gosh, what is that? And you walk in and you see the Kadampa Center, then that karma has a chance to ripen for you to become a Buddhist. So if the seed is there and the cooperative cause is there, the seed can ripen. So these seeds are never lost. There are two caveats. Again, one is they can be purified by purification practices, and the other is that anger, one moment of anger can wipe out eons of positive karma. Kind of hard. When we start thinking about that, we go, wow, we really don't want to destroy our karma, our good karma, do we? So we want to be mindful of when anger begins to percolate up, when a little bit of resentment and negativity begins to arise, realizing that we're destroying so much positive karma with letting our mind just run amok. So again, these are very important to memorize. Karma is definite, that positive leads to happiness and negative leads to suffering. It's expandable, it's growing exponentially. We can't experience a result without having created the cause, and karma is never lost. Any questions about that? Pretty straightforward? Yeah. All right, so that's something you should memorize.
Lisa.
Yeah.
This might be kind of weird, but are we creating and ripening karma at the same time? Are they happening at the same time?
Well, yes. We are, obviously there's karma ripening like right now for all of us to see ourselves in Kadampa Center and having this experience. And by the way, it's a good question, because this is one of the hard ones. Because you go, well, if I create positive karma, is that the result of positive karma ripening, causing me to create positive karma? Is everything just sort of predestined? And Buddhism says no. Buddhism says we do have choice in the matter. We do have choice. I call it choice karma. We create some karma that gives us the opportunity to choose. But yeah, there's karma ripening, and then there's new karma always being created. And it's happening like boom, boom, boom. But it's a great question. All right, so the four opponent powers. Yeah, we all want to know how to purify karma, right? How are we doing with time? Okay. All right, well, let me just sit down for a minute. So purifying karma, that's a big one, because again, this is something that we need to learn that we need to memorize. The 4 R's: reliance, regret, remedy, and the resolve. All right, this reminds me, anybody, I never was a Catholic, I never went to confession. Has anybody been to confession before? Chris? Yeah. I never had a problem with, before I didn't know anything about confession, but actually the monks, Tibetan monks, once a month, actually maybe twice a month, I think on the new moon and full moon, they have confession. And usually the confession is more powerful if you do it with another person, rather than just violently do it to yourself. And so that's part of the monastic vows, is to do confession. Well, I think it's twice a month, but it might be once a month. But anyway, so confession's a big deal, because what we want to do by the application of these 4 opponent powers, we want to weaken the force of this karma. Ultimately, we can completely, literally burn that karmic seed up so that it cannot yield fruit. But the only way to ultimately do that is to have the view of emptiness. But in the meantime, just by doing these 4 opponent powers, for example, when we do on New Year's Eve, usually we have a lot of fires out here, and people come here who never come all year long. It's almost like Easter Sunday. People come that don't come all, but they come. But this is the whole point: is to go through here, and if you understand the 4 planet powers, that's really what we're trying to do. So we start out. The first one is the power of reliance, and that was a little bit hard to explain. Sometimes, I've heard people say, well, you get up where you fell down from, but it's really about relying on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and bodhicitta, compassion. That's what we're relying on in our spiritual life, in our spiritual practice, and to make those points that follow more powerful. So we start out with the power of reliance, and the next one is regret. So here's where it's really good to, again, the sincerity of our regret is everything. I mean, you can go, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. We don't really feel any, but the sincerity, the depth of our contrition, that's a good Catholic word, isn't it? Contrition, our regret is important. So we need to have sincere regret. So if we said something harmful or destructive or damaging or did something, we need to have sincere regret, and that's important. And again, I'll make the distinction between guilt in Buddhism and regret. Anybody want to take that one? Anybody remember what's the difference?
That's just been on my mind a lot the past few days, and I'm actually able to figure out the difference. I can move on from regret, but with guilt, it holds me back and keeps me from bettering my situation. Mm-hmm. That's personally what I've been actually, past few days have been very intense with that.
Yeah. So. That's awesome. And that's the right attitude to have. It's not like normally we go, oh, I'm a bad person, I'm guilty, like the judge says, you're guilty, you're going to prison. Guilt is self-flagellation, isn't it? It just puts us down. But regret is like, again, they use the example of these 3 guys in the bar. I'll go back to that one again. And they're all drinking, the first guy knocks down a drink, and then the next guy takes a drink, and then the third guy takes a drink. Well, the first guy falls over dead, and the second guy, about 30 seconds later, he falls over dead. And the third guy, who just drank poison, you think he's feeling guilty? He just poisoned himself. Same thing in karma. When we did something destructive, we just poisoned ourselves. So the proper response to that is guilt. Guilt. It's not guilt. It's regret. Oh my God, I'm poisoning myself. You're going to try to throw it up. You're going to try to clean it up. You want to clean it up. You want to vomit it up, get that poison out of your system. So this is a really important distinction to make. Regret. When we do something, we're not bad people. We just did something stupid and regrettable. So then the next thing is the remedy. It could be reading scriptures. It could be coming to Kadampa Center and doing service. It could be, making offerings to our gurus. These are the traditional things that are done. The Vajrasattva mantra, the 100-syllable mantra that I hope everybody's memorizing. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manapalaya, that one. The 100-syllable mantra is classic one. Back when I was beginning a student in Buddhism, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa used to have every one of their students go off for a 3-month retreat, two or 3 month retreat, and do 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras. We're talking a lot of work. 6 to 8 hours, 6 to 8, usually 8 hours a day of these visualization practices and doing these mantras to purify, because we're such a mess. We have so much negative karma. Our garden is choked with weeds, and we need to pull these weeds out. And that's what, the remedy is. So the remedy is also apologizing to people, isn't it? If you did something that was regrettable, then going and saying something to somebody or correcting the situation, doing something that's, logical. If you said something that was damaging, or I think in AA, for example, don't they have there's one of the, I'm not an alcoholic, by the way. I could be, but I'm not. But it happens to a lot of people, and they go to AA and they get a lot of help from it. And one of the big things that they do is they go back. One of the instructions is, I think, is to go from everybody who you have harmed in your life that you can remember. Try to go back and clean it up and apologize and correct the situation if it's would be skillful to do that. It wouldn't cause more ick than it would. You know what I'm saying? Because there's some situations you go, you best just leave it alone. But again, going back and cleaning up what's going on. But the remedy here is apologizing, but it's also doing spiritual practices, and we'll be doing Dorji Kadro, which is the remedy on New Year's Eve here, where you're imagining all your negative karma in the form of these black sesame seeds, and the negative karma comes out of your heart, up your nostril, into the seeds, and you offer the seeds to the Dorji Kadro, and you can hear the seeds go pop, 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 pop. Lily's done Dorji Kadro a lot. We used to do it every Sunday at my house before we had a children's program. And then resolve. So what's the most important of the 4 opponent powers? Is the resolve. It's the vow, it's the promise to not do it again. And I would suggest promising to not do it again for just one day or 1 hour, or maybe even 1 minute. If our default attitude is anger, and it's hard to restrain our anger, then let's keep our word. Let's say, okay, for the next 1 hour, I'm not going to get angry at anybody. And then you should go to Umstead Park and take a walk, and hopefully you don't see anybody, and then you can keep your word. But if you can do it for a day, again, going back to AA, 1 day at a time, they say that in terms of alcohol, avoiding alcohol. So the power of resolve is the most important of the 4 opponent powers. So reliance, regret for the actions that whatever action it was, the remedy, and the resolve to not do it again for some finite period of time that you can keep your word. You don't want to add lying on top of everything else. So, it's also okay to say, to the best of my ability, or I'm not going to kill any living being, for the rest of my life, or I'm not going to kill a human being, or something like that. But make it real. Try to keep your word. It's really important. Then here we go to the 10 non-virtuous actions. So, why don't we take a 2-minute? Yeah, go ahead.
The mic, just so folks online can hear.
So what brought me into interest in Buddhism was an action that I'd done that had everything except reliance, because I didn't have anything to rely on. Okay, so I had the regret, I had the resolve, and I had the remedy, but I didn't have a reliance. Mm-hmm. I didn't have anything to rely on.
Right.
That I knew of, consciously that I knew of.
Right.
And so I just have picked up on this many, many years later, as we're sitting here tonight, that there was no reliance there when I began the practice, because it was an action of attempting to kill someone, mm-hmm. right? And what I did was I knew that my action was wrong. I knew that I didn't want to try to harm another human being again. you know, and the remedy that was to not create the action or put myself in a situation where I would feel that type of anger.
Mhm.
Right, but I had nothing to rely on at the time. I mean, unless it was just so deeply embedded in my mind stream that I didn't even recognize it.
Right.
But
Yeah, and that's not to say that obviously something worked, because you weaken the force of that tendency. You know, we can't, like I said, we will not be able to completely purify negative karma. Let's say we stole something or whatever, or attempted to kill somebody or whatever it was. We may not be able, we can't completely eliminate the negative karma by practicing the four opponent powers, but we can weaken it substantially. And until we have direct intuitive insight into emptiness, then we can completely eradicate it. But again, we have to do as much as we can to stop that karma from continuing to expand and ripen and get bigger and bigger. So we practice the four opponent powers to weaken the force, of the negative karma. So we don't have to experience the consequences. Make sense? Yeah. And the four opponent powers is a traditional way that is done. And the first one is I rack my brain trying to think of I read about it, and you get up where you fell down, that's the ground on which you stand on to do these practices. The other three remedies, the regret, remedy, and resolve are all, you start out with reliance. So that's important. So those are the four opponent powers. So let's, so these are the, so what are the 10 virtues? What are the 10 virtues? These are the 10 non-virtuous actions. All right, there's 3 of body: killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Everybody knows what that means. Then the 4 of speech: lying or deceiving others, slandering, bad-mouthing people, turning people against one another, harsh speech, and idle gossip. All right, so the 4 of speech. You can see they go from strongest to the weakest, okay? And then the last 3 are the mind. And again, the mind's really hard to control. But covetousness or clinging or attachment, ill will or hatred, and then ignorance. And as Chris was talking about, that's, in a big way, in this particular set, the way we present it, it's really more about wrong view. It's like not believing in your potential, the fact that you have Buddha nature, that you can actually eliminate your faults and achieve nirvana. Disbelief in the laws of karma, disbelief in past and future lifetimes, disbelief in the potential for supreme enlightenment. There's a whole bunch of things. I can't remember the list, but ultimately ignorance is also not seeing things the way they are. I mean, that's the biggest, it's the wisdom. The wisdom of emptiness is what destroys this sort of primordial ignorance that we have, where we cling to this false sense of self and our self-centeredness. All right, so again, I ask you, what are the 10 virtues? So what are they? What are you laughing at? Well, here's the 10 virtues. There's more to it than this, but obviously killing is negative. All right, killing is destructive. Taking a life is destructive. Most people don't have a problem with that. Okay, but when we're in a situation where we could kill and we restrain ourselves, that's called virtue. It's restraining, where, like, for example, I'm not in a situation right now where I could kill anything. Well, I could, but but I don't have any interest, If you're just going through your life and you don't have a situation where you would necessarily kill, then you're not creating any virtue by not killing, unless you've taken vows, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you're in a situation where there's a cockroach or another human being, but let's say a cockroach, and most of the time, most people just like to kill them, right? Because they're so gross. And yet we've got this little thing at home where we can, it's like a little vacuum thing, and you can go along and it kind of sucks them into it, and then we take them outside. Not every time, but most of the time. We've saved a lot of cockroaches at our house. And so, again, avoiding killing when the opportunity to take a life arises and we restrain ourselves, that is called virtue. And of course, it's obvious that saving lives is even more amazing. Like if we have in a situation where we can save lives, that's even more amazing. Stealing, we're in a situation where, they think we could take what's not been freely offered, but we don't do it. We restrain ourselves. That's the virtue of not stealing. That's a virtuous action. Sexual misconduct, we're in a situation where we could behave in a way that would harm a relationship or our relationships or somebody else's health, or you name it, but we don't do it. We restrain ourselves. Lying, same way. Situation where we could lie and deceive others, but we choose not to. We restrain ourselves. Slander, harsh, restraining, idle gossip, sitting around just prattling on, talking nonsense, covetousness, ill will, and ignorance. Each of these, when we are in a situation where we have the impulse to maybe go in this direction, but we restrain ourselves, that is virtue. That's the practice of virtue. And obviously, the opposite of lying would be speaking truthfully. So that's also like taking virtue to a new level. And instead of slandering and bad-mouthing people, the opportunity's there, but we restrain ourselves. But then we talk about people's good qualities, and we talk up the people that we would ordinarily might be tempted to badmouth them. We talk them up and talk about their good qualities and like that. So again, these are the again, they say, when you do the module on Buddhist refuge, they say this is the minimalist. This is minimal for somebody who claims to be a Buddhist. They must strive to practice, avoid these 10 non-virtues. Now, by the way, you notice I said avoid. I didn't say thou shalt not, because we're human. There's no supreme being telling us thou shalt not. It's like avoid it. But there may be a situation, and this is really tricky because human beings have enormous capacity for self-deception. So there may be a situation where taking a life is the appropriate thing to do. If you knew and you were clairvoyant and you could see what was going to happen back in the 1930s and 40s, and you had a chance to take Hitler out, that might have been, again, if you were doing it from a place of not anger and resentment and like that, but from compassion for all of those millions of people that were going to die because of his choices, but also for him. Because if he kills countless millions of people, no telling how many millions of people, the Jews were the tip of the iceberg compared to the people that died in the Second World War because of his choices. But if we had the choice, if we could kill him with compassion, understanding that the karmic consequences of taking that many lives is so much time in the hell realms, and just horrible, karmically speaking, it'd be awful. So we take his life. So there may be a situation where going against these 10 non-virtues might be, like, say, for example, if somebody comes running in here and they and they've got a gun, and they come running into the Kadampa, and they say, and they look really angry, their face is red, and they say, "Is Lily Brown here?" And I'm, I could say, "No, she's not here," or I could just say, "You know what? Would you like some tea, or can I help you with something?" I could distract him. We don't necessarily have to lie. We can be skillful about it sometimes. But again, that might be a situation where telling a lie would be a virtuous thing to save Lily's life, and the karma of this guy who's coming in is wants to harm her for whatever reason. So, any questions about this? No, there are no 10 perfections. There's 6 perfections. Yeah, the 6 gosh, I hope I can remember them. The 6 perfections are like ethics, right? Pardon? Yeah, this would be practicing the perfection of ethics. There's pardon? Well, patience and tolerance, ethics. There's concentration, joyful effort, concentration, and emptiness, and the wisdom of emptiness. And I'm missing one. What am I missing? Generosity. Yeah. Usually generosity is the first because it's the easiest one to practice. And then ethics, and then patience, joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. Those are the 6 perfections. So, all right. So moving along here. Again, we've gone over all this stuff every class. We'll continue to go over it. Now there are 4 things. Whoops, sorry. There are 4 things that I wish I had my notes here, but I'm going to just wing it here. For complete karmic action, there has to be 4 things present. All right, and the first one has to be intention. Okay. And the second one, there has to be, I may get this wrong, a basis. The third one is there's an action. And the fourth one is the completion of the action. All right, so we always use something negative. So, but it doesn't have to be negative, it could be positive, right? So we could have, the intention would be, I want to, I've meditated on bodhicitta, and I want to create positive karma that will ripen me becoming a Buddha in the future. And the basis is there's a beggar, who needs something, and the action is me being generous, and then the completion is I actually give this person something, and I rejoice in having done that. And so that would be a very positive action, whereas negative, for example, you can see how if you run over a snake and kill a snake at night, for example, you don't see it, you run over it, there's no intention there to kill, but you killed, So there is a basis, which is a snake, and the action is the snake dies, but when it's over, you don't necessarily rejoice. You may go, I hate snake. Gosh, I'm glad I got him. But you see what I mean? So for a complete karmic action, all four have to be present. And a lot of karma is, a complete karmic action is the karma that can literally project us into a future life. For example, in the next life, we may get lucky and be reborn as a human, but in a much better situation, maybe smarter, more successful, more powerful, more able to help others. We could actually have that kind of karma ripen for us. Again, that would be the fruition of having all, but if only some of these are present, say, for example, maybe, you run over the snake, but you have no intention. But these other things, that's not a complete karmic action. So that's not a karma that could project us into a lifetime. So a lifetime might be like, we can imagine, I'm sorry, I know this doesn't look like a person, but you get the point. So a complete karmic action would be enough to project us into a lifetime. And then they call it the completing, that's called the throwing karma, okay? And then there's the completing karma, which basically fills in the details. The consequent, how, whether we're male, whether we're female, whether we're attractive, unattractive, whether we're prosperous or suffering, that's the completing karma. The throwing karma creates the life, and the completing karma creates, it's like, the throwing karma is the sketch, the big, the overall sketch of what we're going to be like. And then the completing karma, the details of that particular lifetime. If we have all four of these present, yes. If we don't, then definitely karma is being created, but it's not the karma that could actually create a whole new lifetime. Now, if we get, for example, if we're angry, we're really, really angry, and somebody comes up, and the bad guy, the person that you don't like, you actually take the action and kill them, right? And then when you kill them, you rejoice, like he got what he deserved, okay? Again, the weight of that karma is so much heavier because the intention was so negative, and then you rejoiced in having done something really negative. So that's where, there are lots of factors. For example, the basis is your gurus, like your teachers. You want to practice generosity. If you give, like your gurus, like you do service to your teachers, or you give them offerings or whatever, the most powerful basis for karma are our gurus and our parents and the people that we're closest to. Any action done in relation to those beings has much more power than any other object, if you want to say, because the objects do matter. Just something to keep in mind. Just saying. Children. I mean, most kids don't know that. It's really good to know that your parents are the most powerful resource for you to create good karma or negative karma. And it's, we do it, in families, we do a lot of stupid things sometimes. Okay, any questions about this? I think I've done enough talking.
If you're online, if you're on YouTube, you can type questions in the chat. If you are on Zoom, you can just kind of raise your hand, get our attention. And if you're in here, wait for the microphone, because these are really good comments and questions, Lori. So wait for the microphone.
I promise you that if I don't know the answer, there's a pretty good chance I won't make anything up.
Okay, I have a question. I've been wondering this for a long, long time about, it's a little off topic, but it's related to karma. You know the saying, no good deed goes unpunished?
Yeah.
I've heard that saying throughout my life here and there, and I've always been confused by it. I don't understand what is that supposed to mean? Where does that come from? And the way that I always took it growing up here in the West, in the United States, is it, when I heard people say that, it made me feel like almost a sense of fear of doing a good deed, because then somehow that's going to create something that's going to come back on me that's punishment. And so it was almost like the advice that I was being given was, you know, if you try to do good for other people, there's a price to pay for that. So watch out, be careful. But I never really understood that. I never believed that. But I don't understand what is that phrase supposed to mean?
Anybody? Behind you.
I don't know for myself. I can possibly see myself being too nice in situations and being taken advantage of, and maybe that's just the way I perceive that. And yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you know, anybody else have a thought about that?
I just looked it up because I have a computer, and it says, no good deed goes unpunished means that people will suffer at the hands of those they try to help. If you genuinely attempt to help or assist someone and it doesn't work out as you expect, with the person getting angry at you, you could say that no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
It's still not very clear.
Well, I'll tell you what,
No.
we talked about this. I don't know, but it's kind of like almost like a joke in a way, because we know from the point of view of karma that if it's a good deed, you're 100% going to result in something good. Now, this gets back to looks real and is real. Did we talk about that last week? Okay, so when you stick the key in the car and you turn the ignition and the car cranks up, you go, oh, what cranked the car? The key, right? That looks real. Wouldn't you agree with that? But if we look under the hood, we realize that, well, there's more to it than this, but from a simplistic point of view, the battery is what cranked the car. The key turned the ignition, which then sent an impulse to the battery, and the battery cranked the car. So that's what is real. So what looks real and is real are different. And from a karmic perspective, now I have to be careful here because I'm not sure, I may be going down a rabbit hole. Yeah, I mean, let's say, for example, that that you're out helping beggars, right? And you know you're it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, and you're serving meals to the homeless people in town, and that's a generous thing, that's a positive thing, and you're doing it with a good motivation. But then, for example, somebody comes in, you know, some of these poor guys, some of these guys are ex-prisoners and probably, you know, and maybe somebody comes in with a gun and starts shooting the place up. And you go, well, wait a minute, how did this happen? What is going on? Because I was doing something virtuous and now, you know, I've got a bullet hole in my body. So where did that come from? So that's a different karma ripening. That's a different karma. So let me think of another example. For example, somebody could, all right, well, this is a good example. So if you look at the New York Times, for example, you'll see all of these people who've made a lot of money by making, sort of aggressive moves in the market. And then other people make aggressive moves in the market and they lose a lot of money. And they say, oh, this person was stupid and this person was smart. So where do they come from? Why does one person, they're both doing the same thing, one's winning and one's not. So what looks real and what is real, the real underlying cause that's causing what looks real is the karma. Is the karma. And again, I'm going all over the place, but let's say if somebody were to rape somebody, there's lots of ways to get raped, and somebody who enjoys that experience of raping somebody else, you could say, well, that's the ripening of a positive karma. But the long-term consequences of that is going to be hugely negative karma. And the cause of that to happen to that person, the victim, was their own karma. So there was the ripening of the negative karma to be raped. The rapist was enjoying the experience at the moment. So that had to, if they were having pleasure and enjoyment, that had to come from positive karma, but then they created intense negative karma that down the road would cause future suffering. So what looks real and what is real is often is hard to figure it out. What looks real, ultimately the karma is the cause for the guy who invests all of his money in the market and makes billions. It looks like he was clever, but underneath the hood was the battery, his good karma. And the guy who did the same thing and lost everything, the cause of that was the karma. So I don't know, getting back to Javon's point about no good deed goes unpunished, I don't think from a Buddhist perspective, it's not true. But it kind of looks that way sometimes. It looks like you were getting punished for it, but that's because they're different karmas. You did something good, and then you got punished. You created good karma when you did something good, and then a negative karma ripened, and you got punished, and you go, oh, they must be connected, but they're not. That's the best I can do.
Well, the other thing I saw online is that phrase is meant to be, what did they say? Cynical or mocking. So,
Yeah, almost like a joke.
Yeah.
People say, oh yeah, no good deed goes unpunished. Like, not to discourage people from practicing virtue, but, well, we can't go over that. I get scolded every time I do. So we'll have to do the dedication here. So anyway, we have done, we planted a lot of seeds, a lot of karmic seeds tonight. And I'm going to say that these are seeds of virtue, and these seeds will ripen in future happiness. And really, as spiritual practitioners in this tradition, what we really want these seeds to ripen into is us achieving supreme enlightenment for the sake of others. So that's what the dedication's about. It's about giving these virtuous seeds a direction so that they don't get lost. They could ripen in this lifetime or in some future lifetime in something less than enlightenment. But what we really want is these seeds to ripen as enlightenment. So let's do the dedication verses here.
Page 32.
With this thought in mind that whatever virtue, whatever positive seeds we planted, we want those seeds to ripen in our future enlightenment. And by the way, next week, we're going to, before I get done, because this is the short Vajrasattva meditation is on the FPMT website. There are 3 meditations for this course. One of them is the 4 planet powers and 10 non-virtues, and then it's Vajrasattva. So I'd like for you to download and practice this a little bit, at least become familiar with it. And then we'll go through it next week and we'll do it. And next week will be mainly about practice, and particularly purification practice. Okay? All right. So we'll do the dedication verses now. Pardon? Yeah, there we go. All right. May all beings everywhere, plagued by the sufferings of body and of mind, attain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing and the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may these never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, till then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And one last thing, next week I want to talk about the marriage of karma and emptiness. We had a teaching done here in the mid 90s, but it was a really inspiring teaching. But because it looks like karma and emptiness, like how do they work together? And so we're going to talk about karma from the perspective of emptiness next week, along with our purification practice. So thank you for your attention, and I know you could have been watching Monday Night Football.
Thanks, everyone online. We'll see you next week, if not before. Have a good night.